The air in our dorm room was thick with the scent of cheap pizza and unspoken words when Ethan grabbed my wrist. It was 2 a.m., and the world outside our window was silent. But my heart roared like a freight train. I froze, my sketchbook slipping from my hands, as his calloused fingers held me there, tethering me to a moment I'd never imagined. I'm Javier Torres, a 20-year-old art major at a small liberal arts college in rural Pennsylvania. I'd spent my life blending into the background, my quiet demeanor and knack for sketching keeping me safely under the radar. Growing up in a conservative Latino family in Chicago, I'd learned early to hide parts of myself, especially the part that stirred when I saw guys like Ethan Miller. Ethan, my roommate, was everything I wasn't, a former high school football star, effortlessly charming, with a smile that could melt glaciers. He was straight, or so I thought, and I'd spent the last 3 months convincing myself that my feelings for him were a pointless, one-sided ache. That night, though, something shifted. We'd been up late, sprawled across the dorm room floor, arguing over the last slice of pizza and laughing about our disastrous group project for Intro to Philosophy. Ethan had been drinking a couple of beers he'd smuggled in and his usual filter was gone. His hazel eyes, usually so guarded, were soft, almost searching, as they lingered on me a little too long. "Javi," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Why do you always look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders?" I laughed it off, brushing my dark hair out of my eyes. Just my face's default setting. Man, artist vibes. But he didn't laugh. He leaned closer, his knee brushing mine, and my pulse spiked. I told myself it was nothing. Just Ethan being Ethan, too comfortable, too unaware of the lines he was crossing. Then, without warning, he stood, his 6 feet 2 inches frame towering over me, and pulled me up with him. My breath caught as he tugged me toward his bed, his grip firm but not forceful. I stumbled, my mind racing to catch up with my body. "Sit," he said, his voice rough, like he was wrestling with something bigger than himself. I sat on the edge of his bed, the mattress creaking under me, and he dropped down beside me, closer than he'd ever been. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as the silence stretched between us. "Ethan, what's?" I started, but he cut me off, his hand finding mine again. His touch was warm, grounding, and terrifying. I'd spent months building walls around my heart, convincing myself I could live with this unrequited crush. But now, with his thumb brushing against my knuckles, those walls were crumbling. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes searched mine, raw and unguarded, like he was seeing me for the first time. "But I know I can't stop thinking about you." My heart stopped. This was Ethan, straight Ethan, the guy who dated cheerleaders in high school, who fist-bumped his way through frat parties, who never once hinted at anything beyond friendship. And yet, here he was, pulling me into his orbit, his words unraveling everything I thought I knew about him. I wanted to ask a million questions, to demand answers, but my voice betrayed me. All I could do was stare, caught in the gravity of his confession. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he pulled me down onto the bed, my back against his chest, his arm draped over me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Stay?" he murmured, his voice thick with something I couldn't name. "Just stay?" I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I lay there, my heart pounding against my ribs, as Ethan's warmth seeped into me. The dorm room, with its peeling paint and cluttered chaos, felt like a sanctuary and a battlefield all at once. I'd spent so long hiding who I was, afraid of rejection, afraid of losing the people I cared about. But in that moment, with Ethan's arm around me, I felt seen, really seen for the first time. The next morning, I woke to the sound of his alarm blaring. Ethan was already up, pulling on a hoodie like nothing had happened. He shot me a grin, The same one he always gave. But there was a flicker of something new in his eyes, uncertainty. Maybe. Or fear. You good, Javi? He asked, his tone casual, but his hands fidgeted with the drawstrings of his hoodie. Yeah, I lied. My voice hoarse. I wasn't good. I hadn't slept. Not really. My mind was a storm of questions, each one sharper than the last. What did last night mean? Was it a drunken mistake? A fleeting moment of confusion? Or something more? And why did my chest ache at the thought of it being nothing? As Ethan grabbed his backpack and headed for class, I stayed behind, staring at the sketchbook I'd dropped the night before. My drawings, portraits of him, sketches of his hands, his eyes. His laugh felt like a confession I hadn't meant to make. I'd been so careful, so guarded. But now the truth was out, and I didn't know how to put it back. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I sat through lectures, my pencil scratching absent-mindedly across my notebook. But my mind was elsewhere. Ethan's words echoed in my head, each one a spark that refused to fade. I couldn't shake the memory of his arm around me, the weight of his body against mine. It was more than I'd ever dared to hope for, and yet it terrified me. What if he regretted it? What if he woke up today and decided it was a mistake? By the time I got back to the dorm, Ethan was already there, sprawled across his bed with a textbook open but unread. He looked up as I walked in, and for a moment, the air between us crackled with unspoken tension. I wanted to ask him about last night, to demand clarity, but the words stuck in my throat. Hey, he said, his voice softer than usual. You want to grab some food later? Just us. I nodded, my heart racing. Sure. As he smiled and turned back to his book, I realized something had changed, not just between us, but in me. I'd spent so long hiding, so long afraid of what it meant to want someone like Ethan. But now, with the memory of his touch still burning in my skin, I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not anymore. The diner was a dive, all cracked vinyl booths and flickering neon signs. But it felt like the safest place in the world that night. Ethan and I slid into a booth near the back. The hum of late-night conversations and the clatter of dishes wrapping us in a cocoon of normalcy. I clutched my coffee mug, the warmth grounding me as I tried to read his face across the table. He was different tonight, not the carefree jock who could charm a room with a single grin. His hazel eyes darted between me and the menu, like he was searching for something to say but didn't know where to start. I wanted to ask about last night, to lay it all bare, but fear kept my lips sealed. What if I'd misread everything? What if I pushed too hard and lost him entirely? You're quiet, Ethan said finally, his voice low over the buzz of the diner. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, and I caught the faint scent of his cologne woodsy. Familiar and maddeningly distracting. Just thinking, I replied, forcing a smile. Big philosophy paper due next week. He raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. Bull, you've been weird all day? Javi, what's up? My heart thudded. This was the moment to ask, to demand answers. But before I could speak, he reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. It wasn't like last night, not possessive or urgent, but it was deliberate. My breath hitched, and I met his gaze, searching for the truth in those hazel depths. Last night, he started, then stopped, running a hand through his sandy hair. I didn't mean to freak you out. I don't know. Man, I've never done anything like that before. Like what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I needed him to say it, to make it real. He looked away, his jaw tightening. You know what I mean. Pulling you into my bed. Holding you like that. I wasn't thinking straight, but I don't regret it. Not even a little. The words hit me like a punch, stealing the air from my lungs. I'd spent so long convincing myself that Ethan was untouchable, a straight guy who'd never see me the way I saw him. But now, sitting across from me, he was unraveling that narrative, piece by piece, I thought you were straight, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He laughed. A short, nervous sound. Yeah, so did I? But then you moved in. And, I don't know. Javi, you're different. You make me question everything. My chest ached. A mix of hope and fear twisting together. I wanted to believe him, to let myself fall into this moment. But doubt lingered like a shadow. Ethan was still figuring himself out, and I wasn't sure I could survive being his experiment. Before I could respond, our waitress appeared, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile and a notepad. We ordered burgers for both of us. Fries to share in the interruption gave me a moment to breathe. But the tension didn't dissipate. If anything, it grew heavier, like a storm cloud waiting to break. As we ate, Ethan started talking not about us, but about his life. He told me about growing up in a small Ohio town, where being the star quarterback meant carrying everyone's expectations. He talked about his dad, a gruff man who'd pushed him into sports and never let him forget what it meant to be a man. I listened, piecing together the weight Ethan carried, the pressure to fit a mold that never quite suited him. My dad would lose it if he knew about last night, he said, his voice quiet as he dipped a fry in ketchup. He'd probably disown me. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over me. Do you care what he thinks? Ethan shrugged, but his eyes betrayed him. I shouldn't. But it's hard. You know, he's my dad, and I've spent my whole life trying to make him proud. I reached out, my hand covering his for a moment. You don't have to be someone you're not. Not for him. Not for anyone. He looked at me, his expression softening. You make it sound so easy. It's not, I admitted. I've spent years hiding who I am. My family, they don't know I'm gay. I've never had the guts to tell them. The confession slipped out, raw and unfiltered. Ethan's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with mine. You're braver than you think. Javi, you're here, living your truth, even if it's just in this shitty dorm with me. I laughed, the sound breaking the tension. High praise. He grinned, and for a moment, it was just us, no expectations, no fear, just two guys in a diner, holding hands under the table. But the moment didn't last. As we left the diner, the cold night air hit us, and with it came reality. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from his ex-girlfriend, Sarah, who'd been trying to rekindle things since they broke up last semester. His face tightened as he read it, and I felt a pang of jealousy I had no right to feel. She wants to meet up tomorrow, he said, pocketing his phone. Says she misses me. I nodded, my throat tight. You gonna go? He didn't answer right away, and that silence said more than words ever could. As we walked back to campus, the space between us grew, not physically but emotionally. I wanted to grab him, to tell him to choose me, but I didn't. I couldn't. Ethan wasn't mine to claim. Not yet, and maybe not ever. Back in the dorm, we fell into our usual routine of playing music too loud, me sketching at my desk. But every glance we shared felt charged, like we were teetering on the edge of something neither of us fully understood. I went to bed that night with his words echoing in my head. You make me question everything. And as I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, I wondered if I was ready for the answers those questions might bring. The next week was a tightrope walk. Ethan and I danced around each other, our conversations careful, our touches fleeting but deliberating, a brush of shoulders in the hallway, a lingering glance during study sessions. Every moment felt like a test, and I wasn't sure if I was passing or failing. Ethan met up with Sarah that weekend. He didn't tell me much, just that they'd grabbed coffee and talked about stuff. But I saw the way his shoulders tensed when her name came up, the way he avoided my eyes afterward. I didn't push, but the jealousy gnawed at me, a quiet beast I couldn't tame. I threw myself into my art, filling my sketchbook with jagged lines and shadowed figures. each one a reflection of the storm inside me. One night, I came back to the dorm to find Ethan sitting on my bed, holding one of my sketches. It was a portrait of him, one I'd drawn weeks ago, capturing the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. My stomach dropped. I hadn't meant for him to see it. "You're really good, Javi," he said, his voice soft but serious. It's me. But it's like you see something I don't." I shrugged, trying to play it cool even as my heart raced. "Just practice. You're an easy subject." He set the sketch down and stood, closing the distance between us. "Don't do that. Don't act like it's nothing. He gestured to the sketchbook. "To us. To the charged air between us, it's not nothing." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Then what is it, Ethan?" "Because I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm coming up empty." He looked at me, his expression torn. "I don't know. I've never felt like this before. Not with Sarah. Not with anyone. But when I'm with you, it's like I'm awake for the first time." His words hit me like a tidal wave, pulling me under. I wanted to kiss him, to close the gap and make this real. But fear held me back. What if this was just a phase for him? What if I let myself fall and he walked away? Before I could decide, he stepped closer, his hand cupping my cheek. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, and I leaned into it despite myself. "I'm scared, Javi," he whispered, "but I'm more scared of not trying." And then he kissed me. It wasn't like the movie's no swelling music, no perfect choreography. It was messy and hesitant, his lips unsure but earnest against mine. I kissed him back, my hands finding his shoulders, anchoring myself to him. For a moment, the world fell away, and it was just us two scared, hopeful boys taking a leap into the unknown. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath ragged. "Was that okay?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "More than okay," I said, my heart pounding. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream, but all I could do was hold on to him, afraid he'd slip away. We didn't talk much after that. We sat on my bed, shoulders touching, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. I could feel the weight of what we'd done, the line we'd crossed. There was no going back now, and that terrified me as much as it thrilled me. The next few days were a blur of stolen moments, quick kisses behind closed doors, hands brushing in the dark. But the world outside our dorm wasn't as forgiving. Rumors started swirling, whispers from classmates who'd seen us together, their eyes sharp with judgment. Ethan's teammates were the worst, their jokes cutting deeper than they realized. I saw the way he tensed when they called him soft, the way he laughed it off but looked at me with guilt in his eyes. One night, after a particularly brutal practice, Ethan came back to the dorm with a bruise on his cheek and a storm in his expression. "They know," he said, his voice flat. "Not everything, but enough. They saw us at the diner, holding hands." My stomach sank. "What did they say?" He shook his head, pacing the room. "Stupid shit. Doesn't matter. But it's getting to me, Javi. I'm not used to this." I wanted to tell him it would be okay, that we could face it together, but the words felt hollow. I knew what it was like to carry that kind of scrutiny, to feel the weight of other people's expectations. But Ethan was new to this, and I could see the cracks forming in his confidence. "I need time," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I'm not saying I want to stop this whatever this is, but I need to figure out how to deal with it." I nodded, my chest tight. "Take all the time you need." But as he grabbed his jacket and left for a walk, I couldn't shake the fear that time might pull us apart instead of bringing us closer. Time didn't make things easier. Ethan grew distant, not cold but cautious, like he was tiptoeing around landmines. Our stolen moments became rarer, replaced by awkward silences and half-hearted smiles. I tried to give him space, to let him process, but every day felt like a slow bleed. I threw myself into my art, spending hours in the studio, painting canvases filled with bold colors and jagged shapes. My professors praised my work, calling it raw and evocative, but all I saw was my own heart spilling onto the canvas. I missed Ethan, not just the kisses, but the ease we'd had before, the late-night talks and shared laughter. One afternoon, I ran into Sarah outside the library. Her blonde hair was pulled back, her eyes sharp as she looked me up and down. "You're Javier, right? Ethan's roommate." I nodded, bracing myself. "Yeah. What's up?" She hesitated, then sighed. "He's been weird lately. Distant. I thought we were getting back together. But now, I don't know. He talks about you a lot." My heart skipped, but I kept my face neutral. "We're just roommates." She raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Sure. Just be careful with him. Okay. He's not as tough as he acts." Her words stayed with me, a warning and a reminder. Ethan wasn't invincible, no matter how much he tried to project that image. I wanted to help him, to be there for him, but I didn't know how to reach him anymore. That night, I came back to the dorm to find Ethan sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, a beer in his hand. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed, and my stomach twisted. "You okay?" I asked, dropping my bag by the door. He shook his head, taking a long sip. "My dad called. He heard about us. Someone from the team must have said something. He's pissed. Javi. Called me every name in the book." I sat beside him, close but not touching. "I'm sorry." He laughed, a bitter sound. "Don't be. It's not your fault. I thought I could handle this. You know, be who I am, no matter what anyone thinks. But it's harder than I expected." I reached for his hand, and this time, he didn't pull away. "You don't have to do this alone," I said. "I'm here." He looked at me, his expression softening. "I know, and I want Thesis, but I'm scared I'm going to screw it up." "You won't," I said, hoping I sounded more certain than I felt. "We'll figure it out together." He leaned his head against my shoulder, and we sat there in silence, the weight of the world pressing down but not breaking us. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could make this work, despite the odds. But the next morning, Ethan was gone before I woke up. He left a note on my desk. "Need to clear my head. Be back tonight." I tried not to panic, but the emptiness of the dorm gnawed at me. I spent the day in a haze, my mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. What if he decided this was too much? What if he chose to go back to the life he knew, the one that didn't include me? When he finally returned, he looked exhausted but resolute. "I want to see my mom," he said, sitting on his bed. "She's not like my dad. She listened. You know, didn't judge. She said I should do what makes me happy." "And what's that?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He looked at me, his eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "You. This. Us." I wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. "What about your dad? Your team? Sarah?" He shook his head. "They don't get to decide who I am. I'm done pretending." He stood and pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. I buried my face in his chest, breathing him in, and for the first time, I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance of hope and fear. Ethan and I were together, not just roommates, but something more, something unspoken but real. We didn't put a label on it, but we didn't need to. It was in the way he'd steal a kiss when no one was looking, the way he'd grin when I caught him staring. But the world outside our dorm was less kind. The rumors had spread, and campus felt like a minefield. Ethan's teammates were relentless, their jokes laced with venom. One night, after practice, he came back with a split lip and a story he wouldn't share. "Just a scuffle," he said, but I saw the pain in his eyes. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from the judgment, But I was struggling too. I hadn't told my family about us. About me. Every time I called home, I dodged their questions, afraid of what they'd say if they knew. My mom's voice, warm but probing, haunted me. When are you bringing someone home? Me, Joe. She'd ask, and I'd change the subject, my heart heavy with guilt. One evening, Ethan and I went to an off-campus party, hoping for a break from the tension. The house was packed, music pounding, bodies pressed together in a haze of sweat and alcohol. For a while, it felt good normal. We danced, our hands brushing, our smiles wide. But then I saw Sarah across the room. Her eyes locked on us, her expression unreadable. She approached, her steps unsteady from drinking. So, it's true, she said, her voice sharp. You two are a thing now. Ethan stiffened beside me, but he didn't back down. Yeah, he said, his hand finding mine. We are. Her eyes flicked to our joined hands, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, she laughed, a brittle sound. Good luck with that, she said, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. The rest of the night was a blur. Ethan was quiet on the walk back, his hand still in mine, but his mind elsewhere. When we got to the dorm, he sat on his bed, staring at the floor. I didn't mean to hurt her, he said, but I can't keep living a lie. I sat beside him, my heart aching. You're not. You're being you. He looked at me, his eyes searching. What if I'm not enough? For you. For anyone. I took his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. You're enough, Ethan. More than enough. He kissed me then, fierce and desperate, like he was trying to prove something to himself. I kissed him back, pouring everything I had into it, me fear, my hope, my love, because I did love him, even if I hadn't said it out loud. Not yet. The next day, I made a decision. I couldn't keep hiding from my family, not if I wanted to be the person Ethan needed me to be. I called my mom, my hands shaking as I dialed. When she answered, her voice was warm, familiar, and it almost broke me. Mom, I said, my voice trembling. There's something I need to tell you. I told her everything about me, about Ethan, about the way my heart felt like it was finally free. She was quiet for a long time, and I braced myself for rejection. But then she spoke, her voice soft but steady. Me, Joe, all I want is for you to be happy. If this boy makes you happy, then I'm happy. Tears stung my eyes as I hung up, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. When I told Ethan, he pulled me into a hug, his laughter warm against my ear. See, told you you're braver than you think. For the first time, I believed him. Spring came, and with it, a fragile sense of peace. Ethan and I were finding our rhythm, navigating the messy, beautiful reality of being together. We weren't perfect, there were still fights, moments of doubt, days when the world's judgment felt too heavy. But we faced it together, and that made all the difference. Ethan's dad didn't come around. Not yet. Their calls were tense, clipped, but Ethan held his ground. He'll get over it, he'd say, but I saw the hurt in his eyes. I wished I could fix it, but all I could do was be there, holding his hand through the pain. My art flourished, my paintings earning a spot in the campus gallery show. Ethan was my biggest cheerleader, showing up to every critique, his pride in me palpable. At the opening, he stood beside me, his arm around my waist, unafraid of who saw. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. One night, as we lay in his bed, the dorm quiet around us, I found the courage to say it. I love you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He froze, then turned to face me, his eyes shining in the dark. I love you too, Javi. More than I thought I could. We kissed, slow and deep, and for the first time, I felt like we were building something lasting. But life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. A week later, Ethan got a call from his coach. An old teammate had posted a photo of us online, captioned with slurs that made my stomach turn. The post went viral on campus. And suddenly, Ethan was under scrutiny not just from his team, but from the athletic department. They didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. His scholarship was at risk if he didn't tone it down. Ethan was furious, pacing the dorm like a caged animal. "They can't do this," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm not ashamed of who I am." I grabbed his hand, pulling him to a stop. "Then don't let them win. We'll fight this. Together." He looked at me, his anger softening into determination. "You're right. I'm done hiding." We spent the next few days rallying support friends, professors, even some of Ethan's teammates who'd come around. We organized a meeting with the athletic department, presenting a case for why Ethan's personal life had no bearing on his performance. It wasn't easy, and the outcome was uncertain. But for the first time, Ethan wasn't fighting alone. That night, as we sat on the roof of our dorm, the stars bright above us, Ethan turned to me. "I don't know what's going to happen," he said, "but I know I want you in my life, no matter what." I leaned against him, my heart full. "I'm not going anywhere." The meeting with the athletic department was a turning point. They didn't revoke Ethan's scholarship, but they made it clear he was on thin ice. It wasn't a victory. Not really. But it was a start. Ethan took it in stride, his focus shifting from pleasing others to living authentically. We spent the rest of the semester leaning on each other, building a life that felt like ours. We went to pride events off campus, holding hands in public for the first time. We laughed, fought, and loved with a fierceness I hadn't known I was capable of. And through it all, we grew not just as a couple, but as individuals. Ethan started therapy, working through the pain of his dad's rejection and the pressure of his past. I opened up to my family, bringing Ethan home for a tense but hopeful dinner. My mom hugged him, her eyes teary, and my little brother asked if he could draw with us. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As graduation loomed, we faced a new challenge, the future. Ethan had an offer to coach at a high school in Ohio, while I'd been accepted into a graduate art program in New York. The distance scared us both, but we refused to let it define us. One night, as we packed up our dorm, Ethan pulled me into his arms. "We'll make it work," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not losing you." I kissed him, my heart full. "You won't." We moved to New York together, Ethan finding a coaching job nearby while I dove into my art. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, arguments, moments of doubt. But there were also mornings tangled in bed, laughter over burnt dinners, and quiet moments where we'd just hold each other, grateful for this life we'd built. Looking back, I realized that night in our dorm, when Ethan pulled me into his bed, changed everything. It wasn't just about us falling in love, it was about finding the courage to be ourselves, to fight for who we are and who we love. I haven't slept the same since, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.